Hello, welcome to Savannah Knits. My name is Savannah, and today we are going to talk all about everything I knit in 2024. I am coming to you from Utah in the United States, where I live with my husband and our two little boys, and obviously I love to knit in my spare time and read a little bit, but today we're going to talk about everything that I knit in 2024. And because I only started filming podcasts in August or September, I think September, there's a lot that I haven't shown on YouTube yet. So it'll be really fun to go through everything that I've knit this year. I'm going to go in chronological order because that makes the most sense to me. And I will have some clips where I have the pieces on me so you can see how they fit and how they have maybe changed over time. I'll also have all the info about these sweaters, but if I miss any details, I will be sure to put the link to my Ravelry projects page in the description box so you can check out that, because I'm not going to go super into depth on all of these projects because then we would be here for a very long time. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of everything, and I'm just really excited. I've been looking forward to making this video for a long time. I love watching other people's what they make in a year videos. I feel like it's a great opportunity to see people's style, what they love to knit, what colors they like, and also just really good to know how garments change over time fit-wise and how the yarn wears. I just find them to be very informative and very entertaining to watch. So I'm very happy to be filming my own. So let's get into it. So first we're gonna do a little bit of stats. I made 36 things this year, which is amazing. I have never knit this much. This is my second year of knitting, and I really feel like I found my stride this year. I found patterns that I love, styles that I love. I found designers that I trust and would knit from them again and again. I experimented with different types of yarn weights and mostly just wool and cotton this year, but I really like trying different brands of those fibers. So it was just a big year of knitting. Of those 36 projects, I made 6 sweaters, 4 cardigans, 5 tees, 12 pairs of socks, with some 3 more little sock ornaments. I made 5 mittens / gloves. I made 1 tote bag and 2 hats, and that is a lot. So the reason I'm going to go in chronological order is because I don't want to just talk about socks for a while and just talk about sweaters for a while. I want to show the growth of the year, of what projects I went to when, and just to kind of sprinkle them in throughout so that we don't just have one of the same thing for a while. I do have my laptop here for my notes because I obviously don't have all of these projects memorized. So if you see me looking down, that's where I'm looking. So let's start with the first one. I have my big old stack back here. The first sweater this year is I made the Melange Sweater by Petite Knit. I made a size 3. This is a drop shoulder sweater, and it's meant to be marled, so it's meant to have 2 fingering weight yarns held double, and those 2 yarns should be different colors. But this was the kind of beginning of my drop shoulder journey. This is only the second sweater that I had ever made that was drop shoulder, and I really just wanted a DK weight pattern, and I saw that this Melange sweater was a DK weight, so I just disregarded the instructions on how to marl the yarns together and just did a single strand of DK weight. I did Capella Luna Fibers Simple DK in Capilano Bridge, and I absolutely loved working with this yarn. It was my first time using superwash yarn, so I did take into account that it might grow a little bit, so I chose a size 3, and I think the fit turned out fantastic. and I really enjoyed working with the variegation of the yarn. I had never worked with hand-dyed yarn before, with it being so variegated, and it was so fun to see where the colors lined up, and I absolutely love the fabric it created. Absolutely beautiful. And yes, as I said, the fit was fantastic. I used a 4mm needle and my gauge was about 20 stitches per 28 rows. And I did do a folded collar, first time doing that. I really like how that turned out. I think it was my first time doing double knitting as well. As for how much I have worn this, I have worn this quite a bit because I really like the simple style of it. I like that it is a one piece I can just throw on and not have to really style it. And it is one of my favorites of this year still, with it being the first sweater that I worn or the first sweater that I made. And I love, absolutely love the green with my red hair. So highly, highly recommend the Melange sweater, even if you only knit it for the DK weight gauge and not follow the marling of the yarns. The next thing that I made was the Pillars of SimpliciTee by Claire Jackson of Perfectly Knotted. And I made it out of this Capella Luna Fibers Simple DK, same yarn as the Melange sweater, but this one is called Hollywood Theater. And I used 4.5mm needles. This is another DK weight project, and I made a size 42, also knowing that it would grow a little bit. My bust size is 43 inches, so with all of these superwash yarns I did size down a little bit and it ended up being absolutely perfect. I loved the pattern. The pattern was very clear and very thoughtful with how to explain how the v-neck works and the rate. She also has some great instructions on bust shaping and I think maybe waist shaping as well. I can't quite remember, but Claire Jackson definitely pays attention to fit and how it should fit on you personally, which I really liked. And it was my first time doing a v-neck like this, a v-neck raglan. And so I really felt like the pattern explained very well how to do it throughout. And I really love the long ribbing on the bottom of this tee. I find that it is very flattering and just adds a little bit of interest as well. This is also my first time doing a crochet neck edge for this, and I really love the simplicity of it and how neat it looks. I've since tried I-cord as well, and I find that this crochet slip stitch edge really lies flat and is simple, and I really, really enjoyed doing it. It brought me back to my crochet days a little bit. I have worn this quite a bit. I think it was probably my most worn tee this summer, and even though it is a wool and nylon blend, I still wore it on the hottest days because I found it so comfortable, so flowy. I really enjoyed wearing it even if it was going to make me hot. So that's a sign of a good sweater or tee, that if you want to wear it no matter what the weather is outside. So I really, really liked it, and I think that it also showed me that I can wear wool in the summer. So I definitely plan on making more wool tees, knowing that I can handle them. So yeah, that was the Pillars of SimpliciTee by Claire Jackson. The next thing I made is the Tulip Sweater Tee by Bluebird Pine Shop. It is a raglan tee with a little bit of ribbing details. It is made out of Hobby or Hobie rainbow cotton 8x8 solid in pastel mint. And this was my first time making a tee out of cotton yarn, and I didn't mind it except for joining. I could not figure out the best way to join cotton yarn. And so you can kind of see that it is a little bumpy right there. So I'm still trying to figure out which way is best for joining cotton yarn. So if you have a favorite way, let me know. I made a size extra large in this tee, and I used 4mm needles, another DK weight. And honestly, when I finished it, I didn't love it, and I still don't really love it. I don't feel like it truly fits me very well. The neckline has some weird gaping in the front, and I even tried to thread elastic through, and it just made it kind of worse and puckering, so that may have just been my fault with the elastic. But yeah, I find the neckline gapes quite a bit. I think the fit is a little bit too boxy. I think I would want more shaping, maybe in the waist, or maybe I just picked the wrong size. And I also made it a little bit too short. I don't love cropped things, and I think I was just excited to get this done, and I ended a little bit too early. I also feel like there's this weird gaping under the arms, and it kind of shows too much skin like under the arms. I don't know, I feel like maybe I did choose the wrong size because the raglan isn't fitting very well under the underarm. So all in all, I still wore this tee during the summer, but whenever I did wear it, I found myself kind of self-conscious about skin that was showing under the underarm or it being too short. And also the color is just very, very bright, and I don't know if that's my kind of color, is this bright pastel mint. So lessons were learned making this. Yeah, not my favorite, but it is what it is. I have thought about reusing the yarn somehow. I also just don't know if it's worth the effort because I don't love the color anyways. So yeah, and I could tell when I got this out to show that I don't care about this because there's like a stain on it, and it needs to be a little bit de-pilled, and it could be in better shape, which I think shows that I am not too in love with this tee. The next tee that I made, I absolutely love. This is the Aosta Summer top by the Knit Pearl Girl, and it has this really cool stitch pattern, which is made of just knits and pearls, and it's a raglan construction. It has a little bit of a folded over collar at the top and a little bit of ribbing on the sleeves and the hem. This is another DK weight yarn. I used the same yarn as the last one, the Hobie Rainbow Cotton 8x8 Solid, and this is in the color Old Rose. And I used 4.5mm needles, and I made a size F. This would be the other most worn tee of the summer. It fits perfectly. I love how it fits. I love that I can throw it over the top of shorts and go. And I love the pink, and I just love everything about it. And I love how the cotton feels a little bit stiff, and I feel like that makes the stitch pattern look very interesting and just make it pop. And I love how cool it is because it is made out of cotton. So on the hottest days, I found myself reaching for this one more and more. And I do truly love the Knit Pearl Girl patterns because they have so much attention to detail. They can be a little bit wordy, but as a beginner, which I still felt like I was kind of a beginner in a lot of things at the beginning of the year, I found her patterns to be very helpful in that regard. And yeah, I really love this tee, and I really can't wait to wear it again when it gets hot. After the Aosta Summer top, I got into socks. My husband got me the Sock Project by Summer Lee, and I tried making socks for the first time and loved it. I'm also a magic loop girl, so I enjoyed making them on magic loop, and Summer Lee specifically writes her book for magic loop. At least that's how she makes the socks, so her patterns make sense for that method. So I had such a fun time going to my local yarn store and just picking a hand-dyed yarn for my first pair of socks. So I did the Lovejoy Fibers fingering sock weight in a waffle cone, and I used 2.25 millimeter needles, and I did a size large, which is a 72 stitch cast on, and they were too big but I still wear them a lot. And honestly, if I put them through the washing machine and then the dryer just on my normal cycles, they kind of shrink down to the size that I can comfortably wear them, and once they stretch out again, I just put them in the wash. So that has been great. It was my first time obviously doing a heel flap and gusset, and I found it confusing at first, but got through it and enjoyed it. And then my eyes were open and I went through a major sock phase. But before we go into all of those socks, I did finish up another tee while I was going through my sock phase. I made the Poet Tee by Sari Nordland. I made a size 3 with 4 millimeter needles. I used Mayflower Easy Care Classic in Cool Gray, which is a yarn I initially purchased for another project, but didn't like it with that project, so I randomly casted this on. This was not in my plans. I had never done lace before, so this is my first time doing lace, and I think it was a classic case of it looks intimidating, but it's not as bad as you think. And I found it really engaging, and it's just fun to work on something that you know is going to be really pretty. Like, this lace pattern is just so beautiful. I love it so much. It did feel long at times though. It did feel like a slog, especially after so many repeats. And I was really glad to get to just the plain stockinette sleeves. I did notice that for my size and size 3, there were some issues on the lace chart, and I noticed that other people in Ravelry had that issue as well. So just something to keep in mind for this pattern. She may have changed and updated it by now. I am not sure, but that is for the size 3. I also, when I finished this, I think I made it too long. I think the body is a little bit too long and the sleeves are a little bit too short. So I do have yarn left over, and if I get to it, I would love to add more length to the sleeves. I don't think I'll make the body shorter just because I don't really want to frog lace and try to figure out where to like put in a lifeline and how to fix that, so I'm not going to touch the body. But the sleeves are just plain stockinette, so it really wouldn't be hard to just cut off that tubular binding and frog back to here, add some length, and then redo the ribbing and the bind off. And I think it would be worth it because I did spend so much time and effort on this beautiful lace shirt, and I really want to be comfortable when I wear it. Sleeves do ride up a little bit as I'm wearing it, and they just hit at an awkward spot on me. So hopefully I can get to adding some length on this spring. Now we're going to get to the sock era. So I made 3 socks between the Poet Tee and my next garment. I did the DK ribbed socks by Summer Lee, also in her book The Sock Project. I did a size medium for those socks, and I used Musselburgh yarn Arroyo in greenish blue, which is technically a sport weight, but they fit and it worked for when I was making them. I did a 3.25 millimeter needle, heel flap and gusset. Absolutely loved the ribbed fit. I found they fit so well. I love the color of them, and I do wear them quite a bit. I then made some socks for my mom's birthday. These are the Seafarer Socks by Summer Lee, also in her book The Sock Project. I did a size medium with 2.25 millimeter needles. I used Cascade Heritage in Frost Gray, and these ended up being a little bit too tight. In my sock journey, I really was trying to knit tighter and tighter with each sock, because that is what Summer Lee suggests in her book, is to knit as tight as you possibly can. And I should have accounted for size for that, so I went down a size, because whenever I would make a size large in these socks, they would be too big. But going down to a size medium, which is a 64 stitch cast on, knitting as tight as I could, made them a little bit too tight. And me and my mom have the same size shoe, so they do fit her a little bit tight, but we can still wear them. They're just very form-fitting socks. And hopefully they'll stretch a little bit over time. I need to ask her actually how they have, if they have stretched at all. But I find that the cable pattern was absolutely beautiful. They were kind of hard to make with being so new to socks and being new to working on such small needles with small like fingering weight yarn, and trying to figure out doing cables during that. But I think it was worth the effort because they are very beautiful. And then I made some classic DK socks, also by Summer Lee. I did make a size medium, and I used up yarn left over from the Pillars of SimpliciTee top. So I did Capella Luna Fibers Simple DK in Hollywood Theater. And I don't know the needle size I used because I did not write it down, but I'm guessing it was around a 3.25 millimeter, similar to the other DK socks that I've made. What's cool about these socks is that I did a rolled edge, so that was fun to do, just to knit straight into the sock. And all of these socks, I should mention, are cuffed down. I haven't done a toe-up sock yet, which maybe I should try in the new year. Anyways, these ones were a lot of fun to make. I love how fast DK socks work up. While I was doing all of these socks, I also worked on the Tide and True cardigan. This is by Tamara Jordan or Starcrest Knits. This is a beautiful lace cardigan with set-in sleeves. It's got these ties in the front. It fits like a glove. I made a size 4, used a 5 millimeter needle with 1 strand of Treehouse Knits Mohair Willow Lace in Serenity by Jan. And it is a beautifully detailed pattern. It had a lot of new techniques for me. I learned how to do an I-cord ties. I learned how to do all of the shaping around the waist and the top of the waist, like under the bust and the waist, to make these ties. I also learned how to sew in these hook and eye clasps to keep it closed. And it was also my first time doing a set-in sleeve with all of the short row shaping that you do to shape that. And it was also my first time working with mohair at all. And honestly, it was hard. It was hard to do a single strand of mohair with 5 millimeter needles. It was not fun to knit, but the final piece is so light and airy and fluffy and looks so beautiful. And I'm honestly kind of scared to wear it because it is so delicate. I'm really scared I'm gonna ruin it. But I have found occasions to wear it, especially with a black dress that I have. I find that black dress and this cardigan works so well together. I also love the ruffle detail on the sleeves, and I did add a little bit of elastic in here to keep it nice and tight on my wrist. And there is also some ruffling details on the bottom of the cardigan. So yeah, this is one of the favorite things that I've made. However, I haven't worn it a lot. I think I've only worn it a couple times this year, just because it is one that I have to pay more attention to styling, and it is also very warm because it is mohair, and I want to make sure that I am wearing it in a situation that calls for it. But I don't regret making it at all because I find it so beautiful, even if I don't wear it. Hopefully I can get more wear out of it this winter though. I was still in my sock craze at this point. This was in June, July, and I made these Shorty DK Socks by Summer Lee. These are in the same yarn as my Melange Sweater, so Capella Luna Fibers Simple DK in Capilano Bridge. I used 3mm needles for these ones and made a size medium, and they fit really well. And this one, I chose this pattern specifically because I wanted to try a German short reel heel, and I really found it fun to make that kind of heel. But as with a lot of other people, that kind of heel just doesn't fit as well as the heel flap and gusset. However, I have heard better things about Charlotte Stone's German short row heel, so I'm going to try that in 2025 because I'm really curious about that one. However, I still wear these quite a bit. I really like that they're shorty socks, and I did a little bit of a twisted rib on the cuff as well, and yeah, and I think I just love this yarn so much that I'm just happy to have a sock pair out of this yarn. So yeah, those are my Shorty DK socks. The next pair of socks that I made are just some basic socks. These are made with hedgehog fiber socks called A Day in May, and when I bought this yarn it looked totally different than the yarn that came. I don't know if anyone else has had that issue with hedgehog fibers where the yarn in the picture looks totally different from what you get in the mail, but still beautiful. I still really enjoyed the speckles and the variegation of the yarn. It was really fun to make. I did a 2.25mm needle, 4-inch leg, just your regular basic socks with that yarn. After that, I did one last tee of the year. I did the Skyline Tee by Tori Yu, which is a saddle shoulder construction. It has this cool ribbing that goes all the way down to the sleeve. I made a size 5 with 4mm needles and 1 strand of Knitting for Olive merino in ice blue, and I made this too big. I picked a size that was way too big. I should have picked a size 4. I'm usually a size 4 or size large in sweaters and shirts, and I don't know why I picked a size 5. I think maybe I was thinking it would be cuter oversized, and that was a mistake. So when I finished this, I tried to shrink it in the dryer, and it shrank lengthwise but not widthwise, which I should have known that would happen, that it would shrink more lengthwise. So now it is just a very large t-shirt that is now cropped, and those are two things that I don't love in a t-shirt, so that was sad. I also feel like this is the wrong yarn for this kind of pattern. You're using 4mm needles. The gauge is still 28 stitches per 36 rows, so that is a fingering weight gauge, but with 4mm needles and with it being Knitting for Olive merino, which is a pretty light fingering weight yarn, I feel like it just made this very airy fabric, which would be perfect for summer. However, this yarn is so light colored that this shirt is see-through. So I had a little bit of issue with that. I don't like my shirt see-through, so I do have to wear a shirt or a tank top underneath, which makes it not really a summer tee because then I have to have an extra layer, and it's made out of wool. So it is not my favorite. And honestly, I've been thinking about it more, and either I could go back and add length to the body, which is a good option. However, I would still have to wear a tank top underneath it. I am throwing around the idea of frogging it and making something new out of it. Something with a tighter gauge and a smaller needle so it won't be as see-through. Maybe even a pattern with some cabling. I do love the yarn so much that I want to reuse it in a project that I know I will wear, and I don't imagine myself wearing this very often, which is a shame, but you live and you learn as you go. The next thing that I made is one of my favorite things that I've made this year. This is my Doppio sweater. I have seen so many people make Doppio sweaters, and I love looking at yarn combinations that people use, and I wanted my own, and I wanted a pink fluffy sweater. So I had this idea to make this Doppio sweater because I had 2 skeins of this mohair from Treehouse Knits. They're mohair willow lace in its casual day, and after making that tied and true cardigan, I didn't really know what to make with mohair because I didn't want another all over mohair, just mohair garment, because I did not want to go through knitting that again. So I thought, oh, if I only have 2 skeins, then I would have enough for the Doppio. I would just need to get matching fingering weight yarn to go with it. So I did, and I am in love with this sweater so much. So I made a size 4. I did 7mm needles, and the other 2 yarns that I used were Cascade 220 fingering in Peony and Madeline Tosh Merino Light in Kauai. And the Kauai is the one that has all of these really pretty speckles in it. And then the Cascade fingering was just a shade of pale pink. So I am obsessed with how the yarn looks, I'm just obsessed with it. I was expecting a more basic pattern with this, but there was a compound raglan. There's a lot of details that make it unique. Like they have some faux seams and the double folded collar, and I ended up not doing the double folded collar because I was running out of mohair. So I didn't want it to be too bulky. I didn't want a lot of mohair around my neck. So I just decided to do the single collar, and I love the look of it, and I love the fit of it. It is so comfy, so oversized. I find myself reaching for this sweater a lot on cold days. This is also my first sweater with mohair mixed with other wool yarn, and I have really liked the fuzziness of it. I don't think I would want to add mohair to every sweater that I make, but this one was absolutely perfect. I had a lot of fun knitting it. I did knit this though in July, and it was hot to knit with a bulky weight sweater, multiple strands of yarn, one of them being mohair. It was hot, but it was worth it because I love this and I've worn it so much. And it's also the most expensive sweater that I've ever made. So as much as I would love to make Doppio sweaters all the time with beautiful yarns and mohairs, I don't think it's sustainable. But if I could make another one someday, I would love that because it really was such a fun pattern and a fun, unique way to combine yarns into something so cozy and beautiful. Next, I made some mittens. This was my first time ever doing mittens. I did the Sydänmaa Mittens by Hannah Levenemy, and I did 3.5mm needles, and the yarn is the, I'm going to butcher this, Hillholtz Spindry Hansverksgarn in the color gray. This was yarn that my parents brought back for me from Denmark the year earlier, I think. And I really wanted a beautiful mitten pattern to make from this yarn. This yarn is really toothy and really kind of scratchy, and I didn't really want to make anything else with it. So mittens ended up being perfect, and this pattern is free, and it was really fun to make. I remember making these while watching the Olympics, so I will always remember that. And it works up really quickly, and I really practiced working on cabling without a cable needle, which changed my world, and that is the only way I will ever do cables from now on, is without a cable needle. I have worn these a little bit now that it is cold, and I'm gonna say they're not the warmest. I think that the fabric isn't dense enough for them to be truly warm. I can feel wind coming through them sometimes. I also feel like they don't fit perfectly. When I have them on with my coat on, there's a lot of space in the hand, and I have at least an inch of room on the mitten. When I pull them down all the way, they fit, but when I'm wearing my coat, they just kind of get pushed up and they're not the most comfortable to wear. So I'm not sure if I needed to make them smaller, maybe add less room to the fingers. I'm not sure, but I think they're still beautiful and I'll still wear them. They just aren't as useful and as practical as I thought they would be. Next, I made another pair of socks, and I wanted these ones to kind of match my first pair of socks that I ever made. So these are just basic socks using, again, the Lovejoy Fibers fingering sock weight in waffle cone. And this time I did add a contrasting toe. This is my first time doing a contrasting toe. I used Yarn Bee Pigment and Fiber in Green Thumb. I did a 72 stitch cast on and knit really tightly, and these ones fit. These are a gift for my friend. We go on a reading retreat every year, and I wanted us to have matching socks. So I had my waffle cone socks, and then she had hers, which had a little bit of a contrasting toe. So not perfectly matching, but it was really fun to still have the same matching socks on our retreat. Next, I did a test knit. This is the Courage Henley by Tori Yu. Whenever I do test knits, they are spur of the moment, and I have no plan to do them. I usually don't have yarn to do them, so I did just purchase this yarn immediately after finding out that I had gotten the test knit. So I made a size 4 with 5mm needle. I used Cascade 220 in Doeskin Heather, and this is a saddle shoulder construction again, so it has the beautiful line down the shoulders, and then the sleeve continues down. I really love the saddle shoulder. I feel like it looks very interesting and very smooth and clean. So this sweater felt really quick because it was worsted weight, and I hadn't worked for worsted weight in a while. And I really love the Henley style with the buttons. I had a lot of fun with that, finding some coconut shell buttons. And yeah, this is probably my most worn sweater this year. It is so comfortable. It is so warm, but also not too warm because it has that opening with the Henley, so it still allows me to breathe a little bit. But I find it so easy to throw on whenever I want to, really, and I love the color of it. And this made me really appreciate neutrals. I hadn't knit a single sweater in a neutral color except for that Poet Tee in the gray, but this was my first time working with a brown yarn, and I loved it, and I love the way it looks on me. I think that earth tones, I'm going to try to work more in earth tones in the future because I think those colors look really good. So I have been wearing this so much, and because of that, I have noticed that Cascade 220 pills quite easily, and it's not just under the underarm and where the sleeve rubs against the body. It pills everywhere a little bit. So I did invest in a depiller, and that has saved the day with this sweater many times. I think I've had to depill it at least twice, but I have worn it at least once a week this fall and winter season. So it's worth it for me because I love this sweater so much. I also want to add that I think you could get away with 4 buttons on this one. I think 5 looks like a little bit too much, and it looks a little bit too scrunched in there. And I feel like that 3rd button is just, there's no room for it to breathe. So if I had to make this again, which maybe I will in the future, I think I would only do 4 buttons and see how that would look. Next, I made some socks for my son. It was his birthday coming up, so I did the Classic DK Socks by Summer Lee, again in the size small this time. And I used the same yarn that I have before, the Musselburgh yarn Arroyo in greenish blue. And these are just the basic heel flap and gusset socks, but in a size small for him. Yeah. Then came the behemoth sweater. This is the Ester by Scapel and Helene. I think her name is Helene Moo on Instagram. First of all, I'm going to say that I don't recommend this pattern because it is not size inclusive. And I started this pattern in December of 2023, and that was before I really understood the importance of size inclusivity, and also I did not understand Scapel patterns, and that was a mistake. But I loved this sweater so much. I thought it was so beautiful, but it was a pain to knit, and I go through a lot of that in my podcast episode on this sweater. But man, this one was a slog. I started it in January. Okay, so I did start it in January of this year, and then didn't finish it until August. And that is crazy for me because usually I am not a monogamous knitter, but if I start a project, I'm gonna finish it before I move on to the next project of that type. So I'm not gonna have more than one sweater on my needles at a time. Usually I'm gonna finish that sweater, move on to the next one, or finish that pair of socks, move on to the next pair of socks. So the fact that I had to put this one down and pick it back up is a sign of how horrible this pattern was. I did a size small 6mm needle. I did Cascade 220 in Antique Lilac, Soft Heather, and Natural. And there were so many mistakes in this pattern. There were dots missing from the charts at random places, and the chart is not exactly intuitive. So if I didn't have the other people on Ravelry and Instagram telling you where to fix those dots on the charts, I probably would have made mistakes. There were also a lot of things that were not clear at all. This one was bare bones. It had instructions, but I did not understand what it was saying sometimes, and I had to guess for a lot of it, especially at the top. So this is worked bottom up. You work on the bottom of the sweater and then the sleeves, and then you join in the round for then the raglan decreasing. And the raglan decreasing was so confusing, and especially there's these short rows at the top that are worked flat, and that was confusing. So I kind of just did what I thought was going to work, and I'm so glad that I didn't try to keep going with this sweater in January and February when I started it, because I had learned techniques from January to August that helped me finish this sweater, and I don't think I would have been able to finish it if I hadn't done short rows in other projects and raglan shaping in other projects. So I did learn, and that was helpful to me, that I kind of could just make it up as I went, and it ended up okay in the end. I did have a problem with the collar though. She doesn't have you decrease the needle size for any of the ribbing, but I definitely had to for the collar, and I had to redo it a couple times until I got the perfect kind of funnel neck up here. And then after finishing all of it, it is a little bit too tight and the sleeves are a little bit too short, which is frustrating with a bottom up sweater because you can't really adjust length of things. So I'm happy that I have something wearable at the end of all of this, but all in all, it was kind of a train wreck to knit, not size inclusive, and it's not my favorite thing to wear. So I have thought about giving this sweater away, but also I'm still emotionally attached to it because it was so hard to make, and I'm really proud of myself that I still finished it. So I think I'll keep it for now. We'll see how much wear I get out of it. I think I've worn it maybe once or twice since finishing it. And it is a sweater that I can only wear on very, very warm days because it's all over Colorwork and worsted weight yarn. So it is very thick and warm. Next, I made some fingerless gloves for gifts. I made some for my husband, and these are the penny gloves by Petite Knit. They are made with 3.25mm needles, and I used Cascade Heritage 6. These ones are in charcoal, and I think I followed the pattern pretty exactly. I think I just added a little bit more length to the fingers and the thumb to fit a man's hands better. And then I made another pair for my dad for Christmas using the same yarn, the same needle, but this time the yarn is bark. And I did make the cuffs a lot shorter. I did the cuffs only 2.5 inches. Then I made what I am wearing today. This is the Farnham Sweater by the Knit Pearl Girl. I made it in a size C with 3.75mm needles, and I used Drops Lima in Petrol and Off-White. And I found this knit to be really fast and enjoyable because of all the stripes, just wanting to get to the next stripe. And I love the shoulder detail of how the stripes meet up. And this was also my first time working with Drops Lima, and I love the alpaca of it and how it's hairy in some parts. I feel like it works really well if you don't want to add a mohair, but you don't want your fabric to look super flat. I really love the hairiness of this yarn, but I still find it to be soft. And I know that some people don't because it has alpaca in it, but I'm glad that I personally find it very wearable and soft. And my favorite feature of this sweater is the neck, and I did have to work a little bit to get the neck that I wanted to. It has a slight roll at the top, and I found that if I just followed the pattern, it was rolling way too much. And so I did the same method in the penny gloves by doing a purl row at the very top and then binding off in knits, and it worked really well. And blocking also helped it stay flat and not roll as much. So yeah, and I have worn this quite a bit. I haven't worn it as much as my other ones, I think, because it is a turtleneck and it can get pretty warm. So I've been waiting for more cooler days, and it has taken Utah quite a bit to get some colder days. It hasn't been, you know, the coldest winter yet, but I can't imagine myself wearing this a lot more in January and February. Next is my cardigan era. I first started the Kaleidoscope Cardigan by Jamie Creates, which is this super bulky cropped cardigan, and it makes for the most squishy fabric. I love it. I made a size medium, 9mm needles. I used Musselburgh Rios in aquamarine, almond blossom, and water green. And this cardigan was so fast. I knit it in a week because it's super bulky and because it's just a very simple pattern. There's no short row shaping. It's worked bottom up, and you know, with 9mm needles, it just flies by. So you do work bottom up, you work the body, do the 3 needle bind off for the shoulders, and then pick up stitches for the sleeves and work down. And I was a little bit worried about the length, but I was also more worried about my yarn, and this yarn was not cheap, having to buy 3 skeins of each color. So I just followed the pattern exactly, and it ended up being great. It is cropped, but I don't mind if my cardigans are a little cropped, especially this one. I'm going to wear it on top of something anyways. And I found these really beautiful pearl buttons to go with it that I really love. I was originally trying to find pink ones, but these white ones are the only ones that I could find that I liked, and I think that they are perfect. The one thing about this pattern is that there are no buttonholes for it, so it is hard to button it up. I have to have a mirror to make sure I'm putting the buttons in a place that looks good. But other than that, I have gotten so much wear out of this cardigan. I usually wear it more inside when I want to be cozy, when I'm reading or knitting and just need an extra cozy layer. But I have found some occasions to wear this outside as well. And yeah, it's just a very thick, cozy, squishy, heavy cardigan. And I've always wanted to make something by Jamie Creates because she was one of the first people I followed when I began knitting. And when I began knitting, I knit only bulky and super bulky projects, and so to knit one of her patterns was full circle for me, so I really enjoyed it. Next is the August Colorwork Cuff Club Socks by Summer Lee. So she has a Colorwork Cuff Club that you pay $12 one-time fee, and you get a new Colorwork chart every month for a pair of socks. So I did the August chart. I knit these up actually in September, but I knit a size large, and I used 2.25mm needles, except for I did go up to 2.75mm needles for the Colorwork portion. I used Cascade Heritage in Melon, and then that same Yarn Bee Pigment and Fiber in Green Thumb for the white. And it was my first time doing Colorwork socks, and I definitely had to learn to knit that Colorwork really loose so I could get it over my ankle. And luckily I didn't have to frog anything. I did have to pull some floats in the back and maneuver things around to be able to fit it over my foot, but I found the Colorwork on socks to be really, really fun. So I'm excited to do more of those in my future. The next thing that I made was my baker's hat by Emily Russell. This was a gift for my dad for Christmas. I used some Cascade 220 that I had from my Courage Henley, so the same doeskin heather. This is a free pattern, worked bottom up, double folded brim, really simple, but my dad said it was his favorite hat that he's ever had, so it was perfect for him. Next, I wanted to make my own hat for the winter season, so I decided to try the famed Musselburgh by Aosta Teak. I did an adult medium, and I used 3mm needles with Treehouse Knits Spruce Sock in I Smell Snow. And I talk a lot about this pattern in one of my podcast episodes. You can always go listen to that if you would like. I wasn't super impressed with the pattern, to be honest. It's fine, and I find that the finished hat is really, really nice, and I have worn it quite a bit, and I really love how the fabric feels. I just didn't find it that fun to knit, so I don't know if I will be making another one, but I do love the light variegation of the yarn, and as I said, I love the fit, so I have gotten a lot of wear out of it and have really enjoyed it, so that's a point for it, but I did find it not very fun to knit. Next, I decided to make myself some penny gloves because I got jealous of my husband's and my dad's because I wanted some penny gloves too. So I made some. These are by Petite Knit. I did 3mm needles, and I did Madeline Tosh Merino Light in Kauai. So this was left over from my Doppio sweater, and I held this double. And I found it to be a very dense fabric, but it was perfect for making these fingerless gloves really warm, and I use these all the time, especially when driving. So yeah, gotten a lot of use out of these, and I absolutely love the color and the variegation, and that they remind me of my beautiful Doppio sweater. Next, I made the book club cardigan by Sari Nordland. Let me see if I can hold this up correctly. So many cables, so many cables. Was this my first all over cable cardigan? I think it was. I made a size 4 with 4mm needles. I used Drops Nepal in light beige, and I love the cardigan. I've worn it so much. I find it so cozy and beautiful, just stunning. But knitting it was awful. My hands hurt so bad, and I think it's because I used a little bit thicker of a yarn with a thinner needle, because this is a worsted weight yarn and I used a 4mm needle. And with all the cabling and the different stuff going on, my hands were constantly trying to do something, and like cabling without a cable needle, my hands are just straining a lot. So it was really hard to knit this physically, and I had to take a lot of breaks. And there were also some issues with the pattern with not having enough yarn, so I did have to order more yarn and wait for it to come, and the button band instructions were not great. So I followed a different tutorial by Starcross Knits for that. You can find all the details on my podcast episode about this cardigan. And then I also didn't like the 4th button. There should be 4 buttons, and it was just too high. So I took out the top button and now just have the 3 on the bottom, which I feel like looks so much better. So this was also an eye-awakening moment for me in that I love Sari Nordland's patterns, and I think they are timeless and beautiful, but there's a price to pay because the patterns themselves aren't great and yarn amounts aren't always specific and accurate. So I think I'm going to tread a little bit more lightly with Sari Nordland patterns, and if there's one that I really, really want to make, I'll just have to make sure that it's worth it to go through the pattern to get that project. So yeah, but as I said, I've worn this sweater so much and I get so many compliments on it that it was definitely worth it. Next, I made some worsted weight socks from yarn that I received from my parents as a gift. So these are the basic beginner bed socks by Shelby Nichols, another free pattern. I made them with 3.5mm needles, and I used Barocco Vintage in China Doll and Buttercream. And I also did this cool sporty striping on the cuff of the sock, which I had never done before. And I also did 3x1 ribbing instead of 2x1 ribbing, I think is what the pattern says. And these are the most squishy, warm socks ever, and I love them. I then finally finished the Selbu Vod, which is just the Selbu Mittens from a book called Norwegian Knitting Designs 90 Years Later. My mom had bought me this book in the summer, and for her Christmas present, I decided to make her some mittens from this book. So these are the Selbu Mittens. I made them in a 2.75 millimeter needle, Cascade Heritage 6, so sport weight yarn in snow and Christmas red. These were so fun to make. I love Colorwork so much when it's not the Ester sweater. These ones are so fun. It gave me my love of Colorwork back, and they turned out absolutely beautiful. The cuff was a little bit too tight, so I did have to stretch that quite a bit when blocking, and so if I had to make them again, I would not size down a needle size for the cuff. But I think they turned out absolutely lovely, and she loved them. My mom cried when she opened them up, which was really nice, and she says like she just can't stop staring at them. So yeah, they turned out to be so great, and I think I need to make myself some Selbu mittens, some Colorwork mittens, because they're beautiful. Next, I made some more basic socks. These are 72 stitch cast on, which ended up being too big again because I've been trying to not knit as tight ever since the book club cardigan. I need to take care of my hands and I need to not knit tight. So I've been channeling my relaxation mode while knitting, and that did not go well for these socks because now they're too big. But I used Sorella yarn nylon sock in Beach House, and I think these will just be the same as the first pair of socks that I made, that when they get too big, I'll just throw them in the wash and the dryer, and they'll kind of shrink back to a good size that I can actually wear them, and then repeat that process as needed. I next made the port jacket by Ozetta. Here it is. I've worn this so much, and I've only had it for 3 weeks. I made a size extra large 4mm needles, and I used Eastex Lopi in light gray, and I am in love with this. I made it super oversized so it would fit over any sweater that I have, and it's perfect. I could not make this more perfectly if I tried, except for the double knitting. I mentioned that I forgot to do the double knitting on the sleeves, but that's okay. We've moved on from that. Doesn't have to be perfect. I love the fit. I love the oversized fit. I love these neutral buttons I got from Petite Knits website. I love this double folded collar up here. I found the actual process of making it so fun because the pattern is so efficient and clear in what you should do. This is my first Ozetta pattern, and it will not be my last because I loved the process so much. This was just the perfect jacket for anything, and I wear it almost every day that I go outside. So yeah, this is a great success. I love it. And I'm glad that I did a jacket in this yarn because it is a little bit too scratchy for my taste, and I do have some more yarn in a different colorway of this Let Lopi, and I think I might make another port jacket because I loved making this so much. Next, I jumped on the ornament making bandwagon, and I made the Tiny Tree Socks by Summer Lee, and these are just these tiny little socks that you can make out of any scrap yarn that you have, and I have used all of these yarns in other sweaters and socks before, but if you want to know the details, you can head to my Ravelry projects page. I don't want to list out all of this yarn because I've already said most of these. And it was really fun and easy and quick, and I knit all of 3 of them in just one night of knitting, and it was really fun to just have a different type of project, and just acted like a palette cleanser a little bit. My next project was also a bit of a palette cleanser. I did the Fold Lopi Tote by Adrienne Basilia, which is a free pattern, and it is made out of bulky weight yarn, and I used some stash yarn that I had left over. It's the We Are Knitters, the Petite Wool in Yarnicorn, and basically you just knit this big bag and then throw it in the washing machine with hot water and felt it. And it was really fun to felt it. I'd never felt anything before. And I think I did felt it a little bit too much and it shrunk a little bit too much, but it's still very usable and just a fun project for yarn that I know that I didn't want to make something wearable out of and something new to try. So my first time doing a bag of any sort and felting it was just a new experience. 2 more projects to show you. If you've made it this far, hats off to you. So I made these Christmas socks. These are just basic socks, 64 stitch cast on, which ended up being perfect with this new relax mode I am channeling with my knitting. So these are Ruby and Roses soft rose yarn in the colorway Gumdrops. This is a Christmas special yarn that she did. And I had a lot of fun knitting these. I mentioned in my last podcast episode that they kind of reminded me of Wicked colors. And so knitting these at the same time period as seeing Wicked and that whole era was just really fun. And I absolutely love these socks. I finished them just in time for Christmas and I was able to wear them on Christmas and absolutely loved it. Just having a pair of Christmas socks, and I'm gonna try to make that a thing every year where every December I can knit a pair of Christmas themed socks. It doesn't have to be Christmas colors per se, but maybe just Christmas themed, and then have a fresh new pair for me on Christmas. I think that would be fun to continue on doing. My last finished object is something totally new because I have finished it only a couple days ago, so I haven't even shown it on a podcast episode yet, so I will go into more detail on it in my next podcast episode, probably in a couple weeks. But I did the Hibernate Pullover by Amy Scher, which is this beautiful v-neck raglan, and it is knit in a size C. I used 4mm needles and I used Capella Luna Fiber Simple DK in Fairy. And this is the last of my Christmas yarn from Christmas 2023. I had made a big order from Capella Luna Fibers, if you can't tell. And I really wanted to finish this yarn before Christmas, thinking that I knit all of my Christmas yarn in 2024. And I did it. I finished this on Christmas Eve and it worked out really well. And this is definitely in my top 5 of this year. I love the fit so much. I definitely was stressed about the fit, choosing sizes, because 1, superwash yarn, 2, I didn't want the v-neck to be too high or too low, and honestly it was perfect. I love the fit so much. It's not too oversized, but it's not too tight. I did add some rows to the collar a little bit to give me more coverage. But I am in love with this pattern. I'm in love with the yarn. The pattern was really clear and easy to follow. There wasn't too many words, but there was just enough explanation that I never ever had a question on what to do next. And I also love that the pattern doesn't have tubular bind off anywhere. I think because 2x2 ribbing, it's a little bit more tricky to do a tubular bind off, but I really just love the finishing of just binding off in the knit stitch. I find it really looking clean and beautiful. So I enjoyed not having to do that, which is why I think I knit this so fast as well. And I can see myself wearing this weekly, but yeah, I love this so much, so much. And I love the color of the yarn too. It's just light variegation of the green adds a little bit of depth to the sweater. We just went through 36 projects, and that is a lot of knitting for this year. I have knit more than I ever have before. My reading suffered a little bit for it, but I had so much fun learning all of these new techniques, learning, drop shoulders and compound raglans and socks and hats and mittens and colorwork and cables and lace and everything. I feel like I tried almost everything this year, and I really loved my journey of knitting. And most of these things I can say that I will be wearing for years to come, which is fantastic. That's where I want to be. I want to be knitting things that are bringing me joy, not only in the making of them, but also in wearing them. And of course, there's some things that I am still learning and still figuring out what I like as far as colors and fit and designers and styles and things like that. But that's part of the journey, and it would be boring if we knew exactly what we wanted all the time. And I'm just really, really happy about this year of knitting. And I'm also especially happy to be on YouTube and to interact with you guys. I have loved getting to know you, and I always do a question of the day in my videos. So my question of the day is, I wanted to know what is one of your favorite things that you made this year so I can check it out and maybe add it to my Ravelry queue. So if you've made it this far, again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know this was long and I know there was a lot to go through, but I really, really appreciate it. I am very, very excited to show you guys what I've been working on in my next podcast episode. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss that when it comes out, probably in a couple weeks. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Savan Knits, and please feel free to send me a message, ask any questions, or leave a comment down below, and I will make sure to respond. And I want to wish you all of the joy in your making, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your 2024 and beginning of 2025. And with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!